All right. Good morning, Josie. Thanks for joining me on Meeting of the Minds. Again, this is Jake Hunter, the general manager for Wrestling Mindset. Josie, I want to start. Just tell us a little bit about you and your background within the sport, and then we'll kind of jump into a few different topics about mindset and how it impacts young ladies and the women that are starting to get involved with this sport.
Okay, well, my name is Jocelyn Buck, and people usually call me Josie. And basically, I'm just a simple mom who has a daughter who is 8 years old, and she wrestles, and she's a beast on the mat. How I started basically is I did start doing jujitsu first, and then prior to doing jujitsu, well, I competed in jiu-jitsu, and then in order for me to excel in that for my competition, I took some wrestling sessions. And while at the same time, my daughter was also doing jiu-jitsu, and she got interested in doing wrestling. So then, because of that, she fell in love with wrestling, and seeing that she loves it so much, I saw that spark in her eyes, and and I saw a lot of girls in our. Actually, I didn't see a lot of girls in our club. There was only one girl, which was our coach's stepdaughter. Her name is Maya, and who is now my daughter's best friend. So then when my daughter got interested on it, they became such close friends. And so I was like, well, you know what, there should be more girls in our club. So that's how I really got into it even more, where okay, we got to get wrestling, girls wrestling out there. And social media basically was like the bridge, like basically where it needs to be out there, not just word of mouth, but using the social media in it. And so one of the admin at the social media, which is the wrestle girl, and then also wrestle like a girl, and also women's wrestling, breaking the stereotype. They basically approached me to see if I would like to be the admin. And so anything that has come to do with wrestling, I share it. And which to me, it's really, really encouraging because I see first things of how the girls wrestling is growing from, you know, like just for me taking over or just being the admin recently, like, South Dakota being sanctioned. And then just yesterday, the high school in Nebraska, you know, that just getting taken care of. It's like it's amazing that the fact that the girls get to wrestle. And I see the struggle that my daughter gets into whenever time she wrestles. But when she wins that match or even when she loses, like it breaks my heart when she loses. But when I see her fight with all her heart, it's like, man, and yet at the end of the day, she loves it. I'm like, hey, that's a win for me. So that's how I got into it. It's really all about my daughter, and then to see all the rest of the girls that wants to wrestle, but then they're holding back because of how the society sees it for them.
Right. Yeah, and I think we kind of look at the mental side of the sport as very similar. Um, a lot of times I think in our society we don't view mental health or the mental side of sports or performance as significant, or we see it as like the softer side. And so we've kind of tried to do the same thing with the mental side of the sport is show the prevalence of it, its importance across every level, and the way the best wrestlers, whether it's a Jordan Burroughs or a Kyle Snyder, right, a Helen Morales, right, that the mental side is just as important to them as it is for a youth that's starting out. Um, so when it comes to like the mental side, women's wrestling is, I'm not gonna say brand new, but like its preeminence as a really rapidly growing sport really has come about in the last just few years. I mean, when I was in high school, I grew up in Missouri. I only remember one major girl that was, not just wrestling, but like was very successful as well. She was a couple times state place winner. actually in one of my younger brother's brackets, Randy Belts, who actually made Final X a couple years ago. But when we look at, young women that are wrestling, do you think the mental side of the sport is the same as it is for the boys, or do you think it's different, or do you think there's like an added element that maybe the young men don't have to?
Actually, it's not the same, because wrestling, in the world, it's actually a boys' sports, and my daughter has experienced it where when she gets into a match, I've heard it with the boys. In fact, one of the tournaments where she did, my husband rather, was recording him on one of the match, and one of the boys was like, "Oh, she's easy, he can take him down," or, um, you know, she's gonna get pinned, and the boys didn't know that my husband was right next to them, and so, like I said, a lot of times, wrestling is a men, dominant type of sports. And so, with my daughter, as for it's so because I've never competed in wrestling, so that's the reason why I'm referring more to my daughter because
Yeah,
I've seen her more with her experience. It's really tougher for girls because there are little boys talking about her, putting her down, or even unfortunately, there are some parents that are like that. They talk to their kids and say, she's a girl, she's going to be easy. So, and yet they underestimate my daughter. And I tell my daughter, I said, hey, unfortunately, they're going to say this and they're going to say that, but what I want you to do is to do your best. I said, do you practice hard when you go out there? Just do your thing. And I say, you know what, give it your all, win or lose, give it your all, and just don't mind about what other people say. And for boys, because wrestling for them, it seems like it's more of like their muscles kind of type of thing. A lot of times with girls, from my observation, is the girls, like they're good at with their technique. You know what I mean? Like, from my observation with my daughter, it's like she's so tiny. My daughter is she's 8 years old, but she's only 50 pounds, but she's quick and she's very technique. That makes she's very technical, and in her mind, even though she's small, she calls herself small but mighty.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, still to this day, even though women's wrestling is growing rapidly, the world still sees that wrestling is men's sport and not women's sport, or not an equal sports. So um, hopefully one day they will see that, hey, wrestling is an equal sport. And I'm seeing that slowly but surely, in some places. And but yeah, so that's my thought about that.
Yeah, no, and I think it definitely can be true. It's and every athlete's going to deal with, certain very common mental struggles at some point in their career. And it may just be at different times of their career, earlier, or the language that gets used. I know we try to talk about one, for those young men or those parents, what I would recommend is, we always talk about approaching every match the same. Like I want to prepare and I want to try to compete against everybody as if they're, in many ways identical. I'm not going to try to like wrestle harder against good kids or wrestle worse against kids that I don't think are as good. You shouldn't wrestle a girl different than a boy, because otherwise you're setting yourself up for that, that inconsistent performance.
Yeah.
And like one of the ways you'll hear coaches talk about is people that wrestle to their competition's level, right? So maybe they win 3-2, but they win 3-2 against everybody. Maybe the best in the state, all the way down to like, the average or the mediocre. And that would be a danger for those young men to fall into, and those parents, if that's how they're speaking to their, their sons. And on the girl side, mentally, it is a struggle when you got negative vibes and voices around you. And you know, it's one of those things about the sport that I think makes it a really strong positive for, young people to become great individuals and great adults, is their ability to be able to slough off and not hear those voices, not let that negativity pull them down. But it's definitely difficult at a young age to have to face that. I remember at times, that there gets to be talk around different wrestlers as you start to, compete, for, state championships or go to nationals or whatnot. But like that probably didn't show up in my own career till I was, I don't know, 10, 12, 14. So hearing that it's happening at a very much younger age with girls would be a very difficult thing for, a young lady to deal with, especially when she's already wrestling, a bunch of boys, because, girls wrestling is growing. I know, Missouri, where I'm from, now has a girls state tournament. It was actually pretty cool. My old high school has never won a state championship in wrestling. They won their first state championship, in women's wrestling, which, was a cool moment for us to see the growth, because when I was in high school, I don't think there'd ever been a female wrestler on the team whatsoever. And now for them to be able to field a team that could win state was pretty amazing.
I wanted to add something though.
Sure.
At the end of the day, though, I would say the girls, the way that they think themselves, at the end of the day, it has to come from how their upbringing is, how their coaches or how their parents, think of themselves. My daughter has a great coach. He doesn't like puts them down, or he just tells them, hey, do the best that you can, or here we are, we're training, we're practicing here, practice as hard as you can, or he doesn't degrade them. And the same way here at my house, we do our best to teach my daughter that, hey, you know what, you gotta do the best that you can. And it's like, instead of you putting, like, there's always going to be, like you said, there's always going to be people talking about you, about, in your mind. And basically there's always going to be negative that's going to be said about you. Though the saying where, what was that saying where it says, words will never hurt you? It does hurt, and it's a funny saying when we were young, but then as I'm growing up, I'm like, dude, those words does hurt. It gets stuck into your mind, it gets stuck into your heart, and all of a sudden it becomes you. So it does matter on how you speak to them. And so I'm very careful. I'm not going to say I'm perfect, but as a mom, I try to be careful on how I speak to my daughter, so that when she grows older, she'll have that confidence. And thankfully, my daughter is very confident in herself. I don't know if I mentioned to you, but my daughter does jujitsu, and she did a what we call a super fight, where she did in a ring. And
with gi or without gi?
Huh?
Did she use? Is that with the gi or without the gi?
No, she did a no gi.
Okay.
She did a no gi, and so she was she did that, and she was like, it was a pretty tough competition when she did that, and she was like, not today. I said, what I was like, what was going through your head, because it was a tough competition? And she was like, not today. And she was really speaking to herself that, not today, I'm not gonna lose today, or I'm gonna win today. And so to her, when she trains herself that way, I'm so proud of her, because I'm learning from her. Like, it's funny how we should teach our kids, but at the end, we're also being taught from our kids. So
yeah, you can learn from everybody around you.
Yeah.
Even if it's hard to get a break from kids are always needing you, no matter what. Yeah, I think there's a lot there I think is really important. One, I love your husband's persistence of, like, just focus on, doing your best, working hard. We always try to talk a lot more about performance over outcome. I think when we put the outcome as the only thing that is of importance to us, like, oh, I got to win, we put that extra pressure on ourselves. And, anybody that's done competitive sports, can tell you sometimes you lose a match, but it is kind of a win in your mind, because of you had a great performance against a great opponent. And I've often highlighted in one of my matches at Fargo, I got beat, but I had been dominated and pinned by that wrestler 3 months before at Cadet Duels, and then I turned around and lost 3-1. And the growth across those months, made it feel like a win to me, right? The fact that I was able to go from really being crushed to like being in the match, getting the first takedown, that growth and performance is what we should be chasing. Because if you're continually performing well, the wins are going to come. And if I focus on those wins, it gets really it fills people with pressure, right? To feel like they have to win rather than just go score points, go wrestle hard, go try new moves. And in the long run, that's what's going to create I think the strongest wrestlers.
It's true, because I've seen a lot of tournaments where I've witnessed where a lot of parents, they get disappointed when their kids is not placed or doesn't receive any medals. And I've seen my kids, because I also have a son who wrestles. I've seen my kids get disappointed when they don't get medals, and so and I wonder myself if I put pressure on them, or and like I hope I'm not pressuring on them. And I look at them that, what, I'm not upset, or I tell them, I'm not upset if you didn't place. What I get upset is if you go out there and you didn't give your 100%, and you went out there and you're lazy, and you didn't wrestle the way that you're supposed to wrestle, because how you're supposed to wrestle, even in practice. Because when they're in practice, I do the best that I can to stay and watch them practice. And they know that I don't like it when they lazy practice. That's what I call it. Because I know that they can practice better. And so I said, it's not about the medal. Yeah, I'll be proud. And like, whose parent that doesn't want their kids to place, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, I'm like, I think you could have done better if that was really, really your best. But if I see that that wasn't really your best, then why did you even decide to compete if you didn't even give your best? So that's me. That's what I like you said, it's performance then achievement.
Yeah, no, I would agree entirely. I was very lucky. My mom was a 3-sport college athlete. Actually, she lettered in track, cross country, and basketball. And so I was lucky. I had a very strong female supporter, that helped push me. And I think it's one of the things I love about women wrestling becoming so much more commonplace and stronger is like, the role of a mother that's helping young people, whether they're boys or girls, drive themselves towards that achievement and that hard work is, I think, really, really powerful. And it's just going to bring the numbers to our sport that I think we all need and love. Wrestling is always a sport that is kind of passed down from and traditionally like father to son, or older brother to younger brother, uncle to nephew. And having women in the mix and daughters in the mix, I think it could just build a lot of strong relationships and spread all those life lessons that have helped young men for so long, with more young girls, right? I think that is going to be a huge, huge boon, not just to our sport, but to our community and to our country. I think that's going to be really important. Now, as far as moving forward with girls wrestling, what are some of the obstacles as far as like the sport in general? So zoom out a little bit from like a personal focus. What are some of the obstacles that still need to be overcome by like the community for women's wrestling to really grow as it should and really become as prominent as it should?
Well, as you can tell right now, we're in this pandemic, right?
I am aware.
So it's it's like we really want to start practicing, and it's the reality of it that's most of the wrestlers in our community are not as motivated to practice or to drill, and so I'm really hoping that that there would be a way that we can drill and we can practice, and so what I've recently what I've been doing with my daughter is Tamira, Tamira Mishak's talk. She's been offering like free workout sessions, and so when she started doing that recently, we had sessions with my daughter, and she fell in love with it. And so what we have been doing as well in our club is we would record a drill that I would post um, in our private account group account on Facebook. So I think for now, because of what's going on, is just we're just gonna have to do the best that we can to be interactive, whether unfortunately social distancing, to drill the best that we can, and call on each other, talk to each other, and then at the same time, encourage each other. As far as women's wrestling, um, I read an article yesterday from USA Wrestling. It's not as if it's gonna grow. It's not that it's not gonna grow. It's just on pause, you know, and that's how it is with wrestling as well. There's a lot of not normal. We're in this situation right now in our society, what's going on, but um, I'm hopeful and praying that it's gonna, you know, we're gonna go back to normal where we get to wrestle again, not where we're gonna be 6 feet apart. How are you gonna wrestle 6 feet apart?
It's gonna be
How?
difficult.
How can you get wrestled 6 feet apart?
It'll become
So
an interpretive dance.
yeah, right. So I think that's the only way we can do. I mean, seeing a lot of coaches actually been doing Zoom meetings, offering that, drilling, and then at the same time um, offering a lot of clinics everywhere that I've been seeing on Facebook. That's pretty awesome. And so far, that's how we can do. And also, I've seen a lot of from US recently, the USA Wrestling have offered like uh, games on USA Wrestling, you know, informations that can bring in to a lot of the wrestlers, you know, giving informations to them while we're in this situation, you know, just thinking positive because honestly, when we don't have any social interaction, and that mind of us just goes everywhere. Mental health is so important. The things that we see, the things that we read, the things that are not surrounding us does affect on what we think. And when we're alone, it's not good.
I think you're absolutely right, and right now is definitely a struggle. The coaches that I'm in close contact with, guys like J Rock down at Rock of Ages in Kennett Square, PA, or David Morgan out in Detroit, or Lewis Baker right outside of Philadelphia. They're doing lots of Zoom meetings. They're posting lots of content. They're posting lots of workouts. And one of the things that made me realize is one, the difference from when I started wrestling, and I'm 31. I'm still a pretty young guy, but me growing up, it was like I was wrestling in total isolation compared to what athletes have now. Going to Clinton Youth Club in Missouri, and you'd see other youth clubs when you go to tournaments, but there was no connectedness across the country. And I really feel like at a time like that, if we would have had a pandemic, there would have been almost zero ways for anybody to do what we're doing now, helping people continue to grow. And to see the community rise up and so many people be like, even if we're stuck at home, wrestling's not over. No. It's kind of this amazing thing to see the community start to create so much content and see coaches that are so dedicated and athletes that are so dedicated that nobody wants to stop, even in the midst of this shelter-in-place, stay-at-home order. As I think is a pretty amazing moment to see the strength and the fervor which so many in our community hold, and I think it is definitely great.
Yeah, and then even Sally Roberts from Wrestle Like a Girl, even though we're in this pandemic, she's still working so hard for the states that are not sanctioned yet. That she's still working so hard for these states to be sanctioned. You know what I mean? And like South Dakota in the middle of pandemic, that got sanctioned. Now she's working for Nebraska to be sanctioned. So back then, because the fact that we don't have any internet, now we have internet. We have all this technology to get things done, even though physically we cannot do wrestling. So physically we can't do wrestling, but with the internet and everything the resources that is being provided for us because of how the community is working together so that wrestling can still keep going. Social distancing, we're just going to have to do what we're going to have to do. Complain, yes, that's fine. But I always tell my kids, my kids, it's like we're always going to be in a situation, but it's how we respond to that situation that matters. Like you're going to complain about it, then what are you going to do? You're going to pout, or are you going to respond in a positive way?
Yeah.
Are you going to continue in that mode where, oh, going to complain and join that, negative people? Or are you going to join in the positive people where you're just going to make it better for yourself and join in that community to be positive, and, and that's what I always try to teach my kids. And that's how I want to live my life, and I want to set an example for my kids. Let me just share something positive here in our community. I live in Sahuarita, Arizona. I don't know if you know. That's like 20 miles south of Tucson.
Arizona is
And
actually one of the states I've never been to.
oh my gosh, you need to come over.
The Southwest I've completely missed. I've been in a lot of random places for wrestling, but the Southwest United States is not one of them. That's definitely got to be on my list.
Oh, it's actually beautiful. I'm telling you, in 2010, when I moved here, people say, "Oh my gosh, you're going to be in a desert. It's going to be hot," But we've been here since 2010, and I've come to love it. There's actually green, and I've experienced snow. I've experienced warm weather, cold weather. Anyway, so one of the things that I wanted to just share with you in our community is that to kind of give positive vibe in our community was, a lot of times, kids have birthdays that are coming up, so for the month of April and May, a lady in our community set up this called birthday parade. And my son actually got to experience that. So these what do you call it, people that we don't even know in our community, they would they basically rode they set a parade and drove in our neighborhood, and they gave my son, I'm sorry, I'm about to cry because you could have seen my son's face, but they give my son gifts. They don't even know my son, but to see my son's face lit up, out of the goodness of their heart, I mean, that's a positive thing that a community does, so those are the type of people that I want my kids to see. And those are the type of people we should be, because like I said earlier, situations in our life will always come, but it is how we react from that situation that will define who you are,
Yeah, no, and we always look at that as predator mindset versus prey mindset. And predator mindset is that idea of like, what can control in a situation rather than worrying about what I can't. If I limit myself, towards, in a match, all right, I'm down by one. I could think about being down by one, or I could just think about getting that escape takedown. We're in a pandemic. We're either going to find a way to strengthen our community or let it get weak. We're going to find a way to get better, or we're going to let ourselves get worse. And like, those are things that right now we can be working on, and that's like one of the things our program is big on is like, creating those individuals that think positively. And, there's certain techniques that can be utilized on a daily, weekly, monthly basis that over time increase that mental ability to, regardless of what happens, be able to find the positive. Right. And I always think about, there's certain individuals that we all meet that, like, no matter what happens, they always find the silver lining. They always find a way to make that rainy day fun, right? They find a way to make that injury something that you can use to actually improve. And we should seek to become those individuals. And I was reading a little bit on the mind, And our brain filters out over 99% of the information that we receive from the world. And that less than 1% that we actually consciously recognize is either going to be tinted positive or negative based on what we do on a daily basis. And so this is one of those times that like something like mindset training or, can be really powerful, because even though we can't wrestle, I can still be training my mind to improve, which is why we've been, doing these meetings. We've kind of gone into overdrive doing these meetings, trying to reach out to new individuals and new teams to work with, because this is a great time, not just to build a positive mindset, but also to help make sure athletes and teams aren't falling into bad mental health situations, which, like you said, when we're isolated, that has a tendency to happen. All right. Well, before we finish up, is there any last messages or just anything else that you'd like to share with us before we finish it and start our days?
No, actually, I think it's just, I would say that, to a lot of, our moms and even parents, dads, and also wrestlers, young girls out there, and even, young boys out there, is that I know it's tough. It's really, really tough. We're in a tough situation. You can't physically wrestle. You can't do the things that you were able to do in the past couple of months, but don't give up. Just because we can't physically wrestle, it doesn't mean wrestling is done. It's not. This is just temporary. You can still wrestle. You can wrestle at home. Find the resources that are provided for you. Social media, internet, even call your coach, call your teammates. I'm sure they want to be, they want to meet up with you Zoom way, I guess. Find a way. Don't be stagnant. Don't be lazy. I know that lazy is a negative word, but keep moving, because once wrestling season once it starts, you guys don't want to be back on the mat and be tired and be like, oh my gosh, why didn't I move while the pandemic was going on? And be encouraged. We're in just a temporary situation. And parents, keep encouraging your kids. They love the sports. Continue to support them. Continue to encourage them, and love on them. So thank you so much for this time.
Well, thanks for waking up extra early, 6 a.m. on West Coast time. I appreciate you starting off early. But keep up the great work. I've been loving the content I'm seeing on the different social media pages. I think it's really important for us to spread that there is so much good going on in the world, especially when it comes to women's wrestling and its growth. And there's so many examples of young ladies that are just pushing the sport to a new place. And I think that's what it's going to take. It's just like I look at wrestling. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. The sport of wrestling is either going to get better or it's going to get worse. And I really think a big part of that improvement is going to come with this new push from so many, mothers, former female wrestlers, and young women that want to get involved and partake of this sport, which has been very influential in my life and the lives of so many others. And I'm just glad that we can open that up. And I would insist with the wrestling community that, look at what you're doing to promote women's wrestling in your area, whether it's at your youth club or your middle school, your high school, and, think about whether it's enough or not, and it's going to take a lot of really strong leaders to help us transition into a sport that is equitable. And that is, I don't know when it would be that it's ever going to be a 50-50 participation, but the goal should be as many numbers on both sides as possible. And if women's wrestling becomes more popular than men's wrestling, let's make that happen. That's good for the sport, so.
So that's actually, hopefully, maybe 50-50 or 100%, but hey, whatever works, right? We're here to help each other.
That's right. Well, thanks so much for jumping on with me, and I'll talk with you soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.